so like a knife to my heart.
Kim Kardashian's life is often flattened into a spectacle of beauty, wealth, and attention. But that framing collapses once her experiences are examined without irony or dismissal. Her evolution toward criminal justice reform did not arise from branding strategy or a desire to repackage fame into something respectable. It emerged from a sustained confrontation with fear, disbelief, instability, and the slow erosion of personal control. Her story is not one of reinvention for applause, but of recalibration for survival. The pivot toward law and justice did not rescue her from trauma, it gave that trauma direction. The psychological fracture began in October 2016, during what should have been an ordinary professional trip to Paris. Instead, it became a moment of existential terror. Armed men entered her hotel room, bound her, threatened her life, and left her believing she would be executed.
And he grabbed me and pulled me towards him. So I was like, okay, this is like the time I'm gonna get raped.
This was not a loss of jewelry or property. It was a confrontation with mortality in a space where she had assumed safety.
And I was just so startled. I was like, you know what? Like, it didn't compute to me for a minute. And then the guy goes, the ring.
Trauma experts often note that events involving perceived imminent death alter the brain's threat processing permanently. Kim's subsequent hypervigilance was not paranoia, it was a neurological response. She stopped wearing visible valuables. She altered how and where she traveled. She became acutely aware of exits, proximity, and vulnerability. Safety was no longer an assumption, it became a calculation. What compounded that trauma was not the passage of time, but the reaction that followed.
I was definitely materialistic before. Not that there's anything bad with having things and working hard to get those things, and
The robbery was dissected publicly as entertainment. Internet discourse questioned its authenticity. Memes trivialized it. Commentators speculated it was staged. That skepticism was not neutral curiosity. It was a form of dehumanization, unique to women whose visibility makes their pain feel optional. When trauma is doubted, the survivor is forced to defend their fear instead of process it. For Kim, this disbelief did not remain external. It entered her marriage. Her later admission that Ye accused her of fabricating the robbery was not merely hurtful, it was destabilizing. Trust collapses when your reality is rejected by the person closest to you.
Just to think that someone wouldn't believe you is like, you don't know who I am.
That accusation forced her into a position many survivors know well, reliving the event not to heal, but to justify its existence. At the same time, Ye's mental health struggles escalated in increasingly public and unpredictable ways. Kim became both partner and containment system. She navigated outbursts, political extremism, social media attacks, and crises that demanded constant damage control, all while protecting their children from the fallout. Divorce, under ordinary circumstances, is destabilizing. Divorce conducted under a global microscope, involving a partner whose behavior could shift without warning, is something else entirely. Kim did not have the luxury of emotional collapse. She became the fixed point in a situation defined by volatility. Stability was not a feeling, it was a responsibility. The accumulation of this pressure did not remain psychological. Chronic stress has physiological consequences, and in Kim's case, the warning arrived as a medical finding, a small brain aneurysm linked by doctors to extreme stress. This was not symbolic, it was her body signaling overload. The idea that her life was glamorous collapses here. There is nothing glamorous about a life that requires constant vigilance against both external threat and internal implosion. It was within this context, not ambition, not image, that her pursuit of law began to make sense. Studying law was not an escape from celebrity, it was a confrontation with power. Fame had not protected her from violence, disbelief, or institutional indifference. Law, she realized, might. Her interest in criminal justice reform was not abstract. It was rooted in an understanding of how systems dismiss certain lives as expendable. When she encountered the case of Alice Marie Johnson, a woman serving life without parole for a non-violent drug offense, Kim recognized a pattern: punishment disconnected from humanity. Johnson's sentence was not about deterrence or safety, it was about excess. The system had no mechanism for mercy unless forced to reckon with it. Kim used the only leverage she had, visibility. But visibility alone does nothing without persistence. She read transcripts. She learned the language of sentencing. She met with lawyers and advocates. She bypassed public sympathy and went directly to power, lobbying the White House until Johnson's clemency was granted in 2018. That moment changed the trajectory of her life because it proved something essential. Influence could be translated into liberation. That realization is dangerous to systems that depend on inertia. Instead of retreating after a symbolic win, Kim escalated her involvement. She funded and supported the 90 Days to Freedom initiative, working alongside teams of female attorneys to help secure the release of 17 individuals serving extreme sentences for non-violent offenses. This work was not televised, it did not produce viral clips, it required sustained attention, emotional labor, and financial commitment. It was the opposite of performative activism. She also engaged with bipartisan legislation like the First Step Act, understanding that reform requires cooperation across ideological lines, not moral grandstanding. Her decision to pursue legal training formally was both strategic and deeply personal. Advocacy without credentials has limits. Kim understood that if she wanted authority within the system, not just access, she needed legitimacy. The California Law Office study program offered a path that was grueling, isolating, and publicly humiliating. It required years of apprenticeship, exams, and scrutiny without the insulation of a traditional law school environment. Choosing that route meant subjecting herself to skepticism and mockery from those eager to see her fail. Fail she did, publicly, multiple times. The bar exam failure after 6 years of study was not a narrative convenience, it was a genuine breaking point. Kim's admission that she nearly gave up was not weakness, it was honesty. The law does not bend for fame, it does not reward intention, it demands endurance. Her perseverance was not about proving critics wrong, it was about refusing to abandon a purpose she had already committed herself to. What made this period especially raw was its overlap with unresolved trauma. As she prepared to testify in the Paris robbery trial, memories resurfaced that had never been fully processed. Her emotional breakdowns on the Kardashians were not staged vulnerability. They were the inevitable release of years spent containing fear for the sake of functionality. Trauma does not disappear because life moves on, it waits. Kim Kardashian's story is often mischaracterized as one of transformation from superficial celebrity to serious advocate. That framing is inaccurate. She was always serious. The difference is that the stakes became unavoidable. Violence, disbelief, illness, and instability stripped away illusion. What remained was intent. Criminal justice reform became the space where her pain found application. Studying law became the structure that kept her from fracturing under scrutiny. Her life is not a redemption arc, it is an endurance narrative. She continues to study, she continues to advocate, she continues to parent under relentless observation. The systems she challenges do not yield easily, and neither does the trauma she carries. But what distinguishes her trajectory is refusal. Refusal to be defined by violation, refusal to allow disbelief to silence her, refusal to let privilege absolve her of responsibility. In a culture that consumes women's suffering as entertainment, Kim Kardashian has chosen to make hers operational. Law became the language through which she reclaimed agency. Justice reform became the arena where her influence mattered beyond optics. Her story is not finished, not resolved, not simplified. It is ongoing, demanding, and deeply human.